And welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show. Sunderland failed to break down 10 men Swansea at the weekend, but we've all had a little bit of time to breathe, get out our frustration, and welcome Birmingham City even to the Stadium of Light for an early morning kickoff this Saturday. As always, we're here to preview the game, and I'm delighted to be joined by Tommy from Birmingham City podcast Blues Focus. Tommy, it's been 6 months. How are you doing? You all right?
It's great to come back on, man. Yeah, it's looking forward to the game on Saturday now.
Going to say, not much has changed at Birmingham, has it? It's been pretty much the same. Ha ha ha. I have been looking forward to it because I'm quite intrigued by what the hell's going on in Birmingham at the moment. I don't know if that's a positive or negative for you, but I'll try and give a bit of a timeline as far as I'm aware. October the 6th, you beat West Brom 3-1 at home. You go sixth in the league. 4 days later, you sack John Eustace and appoint Wayne Rooney. Since then, you've took 1 point from four, you've dropped to 15th, and there's about a million questions I want to ask about that. But the first one, a month after John Eustace being sacked, does it feel like the right decision early doors?
No, definitely not. It's obviously evidence in the results as well. And if form continues, then it will be the wrong decision. I can understand the club's. I can understand their viewpoints on it. I really can. John Eustace was never going to be the name to sort of take us forward. They want that big name as their sort of the idea of their company as a part of Blues. So Rooney sounded like a good gig, and I still am in favour of the decision, really, in the way that I feel like it's bringing a different mentality to us as a club, and we've had this bad sort of loser mentality, particularly for for as long as I've been a Blues fan. It's just like we're just always second best, we're always pretty much in the Championship, always bouncing back and up and down from the Premier League. We're nothing that special really, and it's that sort of self pity that we sort of carry on ourselves. And I feel like the owners are trying to change that, and so bringing in a big name like Wayne Rooney should sort of support that a little bit. And his first three games were really nothing to shout about. His first game against Middlesbrough, I was really expecting, the exciting football. Perhaps it was just a bit of a teething process for him and some of the players, but we just didn't play the football that I was expecting us to. And then had a shocker against Hull, first home game for him. Really just flat, dull. It was an evening game as well, so the support wasn't there. And then we started to pick up against Southampton, and then obviously we were really, really unlucky not to win against Ipswich. But I suppose 1 point in four games, it's not too much of a. You wouldn't expect like that. It's like not too much of a. Like you would see that happen to a manager. I got there eventually. You could see that happening to any sort of manager in the Championship, but because he's new to the job, it makes it seem like a big deal. But in hindsight, and I definitely did get frustrated in hindsight. Um, it's just how managers go really when they come into new jobs.
I think you look at the games you've had as well, and if we're taking it totally out of context, and I'm sure there's more to it, like Southampton on a good run of form, Hull have actually done
Mm.
better than you might assume. Middlesbrough on a really good run of form, and Ipswich, well, everything's there for there to see. So it's not as simple as 1 point in 4 games. But what I found interesting, I've actually started watching his interviews because I think he waffles, if I'm honest. But you'll know better than I do because you'll have heard his press conference and stuff like that. But he spoke at length about what style he thinks is going to take to get out of the division. He spoke about how some teams who play a certain way won't get out of the division, and he wants fans to be patient because he's going to inject this new style.
Yeah.
So far, like I said, it's 4 games. His style hasn't implemented anything that would get you out of the division, whereas Eustace has looked like it might have because he was six. But are you seeing any of this alleged style sort of coming out early doors? It's only 4 games. I know it takes time, but are you seeing what he wants to do even in practice?
Yeah, I can see it happening further up the pitch, 100%. Particularly in the last game against Ipswich, pressing from the front, forcing errors, and playing attractive football that the fans are wanting to see. So I can definitely see that. We were lucky to get an interview from Rooney in the press conference the other day. Our guy Zach did an interview with him, so that was really great to just have that as part of our channel. Um, And I feel like his mentality is different from John Eustace. John Eustace was very uh, collective. You know, he was quite supportive of his players. Very rarely, sort of called them out on issues or anything. He was quite like a sort of closed sort of policy, I think. So it's like whatever goes on in the dressing rooms, it stays in the dressing room. But I think Rooney's more open to mistakes on the pitch. He said in the last week's press conference after the Ipswich game, some of the players who come on after the substitutions were very unimpactful, which is something Eustace would just never have said, really. It would have been, he might have even taken some of the backlash from himself, perhaps he would have said that, it was, my mistake to bring on those players. But I feel with Rooney, he's trying to match the demands that are being set by the board. And it's this sort of new winning mentality, which has been a sort of a buzzword lately. Um, and I get it, and I don't particularly agree with it, but I completely get it because you've got to drive for better and you've got to demand better. Whether it's going to work with this group of players, we're not entirely sure. But it might work with other players that he might be able to get in January. But I don't know. It's interesting to see how his mentality is different. Obviously, the players aren't used to it because they've been, very opposite manager in John Eustace being very supportive and publicly very supportive as well. And then he's not being harshly critical, he's being constructively critical. But to have those two differences in a short space of time, I suppose it can be a bit odd for some of the players, but we'll obviously determine how good he turns out at the end of his time with us. But so it's all still work in progress. I'm absolutely sure about that.
Yeah, yeah, it has to be. I think either way, I think you can't really judge that fast as much as it seemed like some fans did. I did see the video when he was getting, should we say, some choice words
Yeah.
at him,
Mm.
which is interesting because I understand the frustration from Birmingham fans. I do get it, but even after two games, it felt a little bit too much. And I think if you look at his last game, look, Ipswich have had a really good season. You
Mm.
can't deny that. Obviously, they drew the last two, but they're so far ahead in second place of some really good teams. And he's lost his first three games. Then he's gone within a minute of drawing against Ipswich, who we've just totally talked up there in the best part of 30 seconds.
Mm.
So, looking at the performance against Ipswich, for the fans who were really not sold on this idea of Wayne Rooney, you could see the ones that were there. And I'm aware it might have been a minority that were abusive, but there's signs of life that Rooney can turn this around. There's the Birmingham fans starting to come on board, or the ones that weren't too sure, like starting to go, okay, well, fair enough, let's go for this.
Um, yeah, I don't know anybody personally who was completely against Rooney and was just like not even going to willing to give him a chance. Um, but it's always difficult because social media isn't the real world. So trying to determine what fans feel about uh Rooney and that sort of thing, because obviously it always sways between what's the popular thing to say at the time, because after the whole game barely anybody was giving him any praise or anything for his style of football or whatever. Everybody was calling for his, they're really upset with him, myself included. I didn't publicly show it in the way that some fans did. But of course, that's their own choice. They're more than able to say those things. But now, after we've had a good game against Ipswich, it's more balanced again. So it is tricky to say. It depends what happens on Saturday again. If we win, I say that 90% of the fan base are feeling quite happy again. If we lose, then I say it's about 50, maybe slightly under 0.5%. But if we get battered, then it's starting to fall back into that category again, because then you start to look at the form. So it's either if we win, it's like we're progressing and we're getting better, or if we lose and get pretty mullered, then I imagine that we're going to probably go back that way and say, oh, well, form represents it. He's got to go, and those people will have the bigger voice then. Um, so it's tricky to work out whether people are warming to him, but the only way that we will know is if he does win some games. So he's still yet to win his first game, so he's got to try and do it. He's got to pull that out of the bag.
Looking back at John Eustace, like he obviously wasn't the biggest name. I think even at Kidderminster Harriers previously before that, and then he came to
Mm.
Birmingham, and some people thought it was a big risk. And I think you were tipped to go down last season. I remember when we came up from League One, a lot of people said, well, you've only got to finish above Birmingham and Reading, which is what they said at the time, and one of them correct. As it was, Birmingham were more than comfortable, more than safe, if unexciting. So when you look back at the John Eustace time, is it kind of almost give Rooney more difficult time that Eustace came through that period of A, uncertainty, B, pessimism, and did actually quite well? Has that made his job even harder? Because I'm imagining Eustace is well remembered or respected.
Yeah, I'd say amongst most fans, I definitely respected him. I don't think he had much riding on him. I think because had we had gone down that season, I think it would have been like, sort of, you sort of see it coming. But it was a surprise that we started playing really well because you look back on the team that we had. I mean, I always refer to Manny Longello, who's our left back, or was our left back for that season. He had played like a couple, maybe like a Europa League game for West Ham before he joined us. His first team action before that, though, was just like none. He'd literally never done it before. And so to come straight into us, who was a struggling team at the time, we were in a similar situation when we played you guys last season for the first time. We were playing really well and we're in sixth, and then things started to fall away from that point there. But I don't know. I feel like Eustace. I mean, it was awful towards the end of the season last season. It was just because we weren't going to go down, and you were sort of working out who was going to stay and when the owners were going to come in or not. There was all sorts of talk, and that it was just really poor, and it was bad football. Really, you knew we were going to lose that last game against Sheffield United as well. So I think in terms of how it finished was at the wrong time for Eustace, but I'd say he had a fairly successful time really with us for his managerial record before us and his sort of status as a manager. He was a coach really. I don't think he's a manager. Um, he came in and he did a very decent job, and I don't think anybody can take that away from him. The only thing I would say hit to him as a manager, looking just on the pitch, really. I don't think he'll get another job by the way that he played with us. He just seemed a bit too cautious at times, which I don't think teams, unless they are looking just to stay up, would employ him for that reason. I feel like he missed a bit of a chance with us when we were playing better to really go for the kill and really go for it. And perhaps that's why the board and people like that were looking to move him on then and get someone in like Rooney to take a chance on Rooney, because they knew what they were going to get with Eustace. And it was a bit like, well, are we really going to play this slightly defensive football for the next 2 years? It's like, we'll take a risk on Rooney. And it's a shame as well, because the last two games, I'm pretty sure he was told before then that he was like, we're getting Wayne Rooney. And I think he then just went, right, I'll just play the football I want. It turns out it was the best football he'd ever played for us in that time, between Huddersfield and that West Brom game. So it's just like, perhaps missed an opportunity there. But yeah, I think he's mostly favoured by the fans in his time at Blues.
Yeah, certainly seems to. Last time we were on, we had a really long conversation about not Jude, but Job. I think it was April we spoke, and we had alleged interest at that point, and we spoke about Mike Dodds and Christian Speakman's involvement and potentially the move. And as it was, he became our first signing in the summer. I think pretty much the season ended, and it felt like he was almost here. I think it took a few more weeks than that, but my memory's not as good as it used to be. For Sunderland, he's been a really exciting project. He's fitted in really well, and he could probably do the rest at the moment. But to be fair, he has looked very good, and I think probably better than what some of us would have expected. What are Birmingham's fans' thoughts on A's departure and the start that he's made with Sunderland from what you've seen?
I mean, I really like him. That's just my personal opinion. I think most of the fans do as well. There's a great attachment with the Bellingham family. Obviously, Jude, his transfer money kept us afloat in that period there. And Job, he was, I mean, let's face it, he's not of the quality that Jude is. I mean, I would say he is the best player in the world at this moment.
Agree. 100% agree.
He's been absolutely fantastic for Real Madrid. I remember traveling back from Southampton and seeing the goal he scored in the El Clasico and just thinking, that's insane, that is. But yeah, literally, I think Job has got those elements in him And I think his move to Sunderland was like it was sort of a thing that he is like his own sort of project in that way. Um, and I don't think he would have ever got that with us looking in hindsight because um, the talk of the takeover. Obviously he was still our player technically when he joined when the owners took over. Um, but I think like we were talking about in April about Mike Dodds and Christian Speakman, when we went to Charlton, Jude's second game for us, I think it was his first start for us. He was in the crowd with Mike Dodds and his dad. Um, and so, the connection I always felt, and I might be entirely wrong on this, but I think the connection on the pitch, at least, was with Mike Dodds and not the club. And I think Jude had more of both, really. So he definitely had a better connection with Blues. And obviously that works with him being as the star boy that he is as well. But I think, it just makes sense, really. And that's when it happened. That's when it happened. I was like, that really doesn't surprise me, to be honest. Like, I was a little bit torn with it because it's like, we're never going to see what he's going to be like for us and in front of a sellout St Andrews. But, at the same time, I kind of, he's got his own career, he's got his own things to do. And I feel like if he wants to go and play with Mike Dodds and Christian Speakman, then he is, isn't he? And they've obviously worked with him for such a long period of time that they've managed to build up a development. And then we had him on the podcast about a year ago now. And he said about Job, he says, like, Job is Job, he's not Jude, he's not anybody else in the world. And so he's got such a unique position where he can just be himself. And I feel like that's his thing, isn't it? He doesn't need to walk in Jude's footsteps. He can go and do his own thing. So, I mean, like, he scored twice. I can't remember who it was against earlier in the season.
Rotherham. Yeah, Rotherham. Yeah.
Yeah, he turned that game around and two very good goals as well. He had a bit of a nightmare against Ipswich on his opening day. Missed from
Yeah.
about 2 yards out. But it's all. I suppose that's all down to nerves. And he obviously has redeemed himself since. He played fantastically in the Sheffield Wednesday game away, as if I remember rightly. That was on the
Yeah.
telly. That was. And just thinking, yeah, he's gonna. And I mean, I hate to have to say this as a Blues fan, but I think Tony Mowbray would get the best out of him as well. He just seems to have that style. I mean, every time we play his team, so we played Blackburn a couple of years ago, and they just absolutely tore us to pieces. It was amazing. Like, the football that he'd gotten playing was absolutely brilliant. They beat us about 4-0 or something. Reda Cadro, who was on loan with us last season, towards the end of last season, was just absolutely tearing us apart. So I think his style of football, and he can sort of integrate Jope in over time. So he's still a young kid as well. I think he's still 17, 18?
Just turned 18, like last
Just
month,
turned
I think.
18, yeah. Yeah. So like he's got plenty of time to develop and start to really push on. And like with Jude, like obviously he was playing for Dortmund, but you consider consider where he is now and consider where Jude was when he was 18. It takes time, and who knows, the thing is, it's a good thing we're playing in England as well, and the way he is as well, he's got the opportunity to go up into the Premier League. There is all the possibilities that he could just go straight to being another great player. But I wish him nothing but good luck. Really, I know some fans were a little bit. I don't want to say bitter because that makes it sound gives off the wrong impression, but I don't know. I think they were just a bit upset, really, the fact that he decided to leave us for Sunderland. But I could just see the Mike Dodds link, so I was just like, makes sense, really, in my opinion.
I think I could see, if I take off my rose tinted Sunderland glasses, it's a championship club to a championship club. Obviously, I think Sunderland at the time, and still probably do, feel a little bit further ahead than what Birmingham are at the moment. And Job's obviously a Birmingham fan, or so he says he is. So I kind of understand the frustration, but from a Sunderland perspective, I also understand the move. I think you summed it up quite well. I think Mike Dodds and Speakman had a hell of a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're never going to have Jude at either club anymore for you, unfortunately. But I did want to touch on the fact that I found it hilarious that two players that played for us, both Craig Gardner and Seb Larson, were apparently Jude Bellingham's heroes. I mean,
well, would have been in the same year as me at school. I'm about 8 8 months older than him. He was born in June. I was born in October. Um, but yeah, it's a ridiculous thing to think of. But they probably would have been his heroes growing up. I mean, it's mental to think that really, but they were mine as well. That Carling Cup team was perhaps some of my best memories growing up as a Blues fan. Obviously, we finished ninth the season before with players like Cameron Jerome and Kevin Phillips, Christian Benitez, of course.
Like Kevin Phillips wasn't too bad of a player. He was
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
good.
got us promoted the season before. And obviously done like a massive job for you guys as Sunderland as well, yeah.
You could say that.
Um, but of course, it's weird how sort of football works around itself because obviously Greg Gardner's still involved with us at Blues and Seb Larson. He spent a very long amount of time at Sunderland in the end. But they were massive in the way that the Blues were in that time in the late 2010s, early 2010s, sorry. But it was like he really that I think that sort of era, like Blues fans in like their early 20s now will have fond memories of those players. And it is strange thinking about it, but that they were great players at the time. They League Cup winners. For God's sake.
You touched on it before about the way that Job left. And Twitter's not a barometer for anything. You said before, social media is not real life, and I couldn't have agreed with it more. But what kind of reception is he likely to get, Job, if he gets one at all? I know he didn't play that many games.
I'd like to think he gets an applause or at least not a boo, because I know some fans can be a bit, hostile sometimes, and that's fair enough. Play people who have to have whatever opinion, but I definitely won't be booing him. I think he'd get a good reception. I don't think people are going to go mad at him unless it depends really. If he scores against us and God forbid he starts, giving the classic Jude Bellingham celebration towards us in the top, then I don't know what's going to happen really. I mean, I'd be very disappointed if that does happen. But even if he does score, I do think he won't celebrate. I'm crossing all my fingers really just for that.
Modern day footballer, I think he's what, to be fair to him, I think as Sunderland fans, and I can't speak for everyone, but it seems in the main we've been quite surprised by A, how mature he is on the pitch, B, how mature he is off the pitch. He seems to be, I mean, it looks like that Bellingham family's from a pretty good stock. Obviously he's got very good parents when you read stuff, and I think the kid's obviously well put together. So I think, modern day footballers tend not to celebrate against their former clubs anyway. I'd like to think he would, but at the same time, that's just the devil inside me, I think. But one player that could have played on sort of either side as well is Jay Stansfield. We were obviously heavily linked to him. And I think at one point we even had a full-on discussion on our review show because I believe he was at the stadium. I can't remember which game it was. Then as it was, he went to Birmingham. He wanted to remain closer to his family on loan. I think everyone knows his family history. That makes total sense to me, and it makes complete sense why he wants to be close to his mum. Looks like he's been pretty decent, but how good has he been?
I think he's been, one of our best strikers since we lost Trey Adams a couple of seasons ago, and he's got that similar flair to him. Actually, he's very alert. I think that's probably the best thing you can tell. He might not have the best of games, and he might not score on the weekend, but he just seems to know when to be switched on, if that makes sense. He's very aware of his surroundings. He's always pressing from the front. He's always trying to get onto the end of things, and his goal against Ipswich at the weekend was like a prime example of that. It was a poor shot from Bakuna, sort of didn't really spin into anything, and the keeper's coming out to get it, but he's awake, he's alert, and he's onto the ball, and he scores from it. And that's pretty much the goals he has scored this season. But it's like the perfect fox in the box, but also with the ambition to take stuff on and be unpredictable, unorthodox, and a handful for defenders, really, because he's got like this sort of difficult way of sort of trying to mark him out the game. So 2 of his goals that he scored this season, his first against Plymouth and his third, I think, against Preston, he sort of like he cuts back on the player. So he's got the ball, but he sort of puts the ball past the player towards the side of him, and the player's all discombobulated, and then he takes the shot on pretty much first time. And I love that sort of stuff. And he's we've had very few players who regularly take shots on as well. So like Che Adams when he was with us in 2019, when he had that big sort of breakthrough with 22 goals, he had that sort of just shoot on sight mentality. Um, and as soon as the goal was open or the goal sort of came into view, it was just like shoot. I think James Beattie really worked with him on that. He was he's a striker coach at the time, and he's got that sort of thing with him. And I really like that because of how it just works. You know, I feel like players nowadays are trying to walk into the box and trying to build the play and everything, but like being the unpredictable, really tricky to mark player, it's really hard for people to try and stamp him out of the game, and that's why he's got 5 goals in his first how many games? I think it's 14 games now he's played or something. I can't quite remember. I might be completely wrong with that stat. I usually am. But yeah, he's been fantastic. That's all I can say.
Yeah, he looks really handy, I think, to be honest. Obviously, we brought in Burstow, Hamir, and a young boy from Ukraine, as the Sunderland fans will know. And unfortunately, none of them have scored just yet. And Stansfield was the one we were linked to before any of those came in. So, yeah, there does feel a bit of an inevitability about that on Saturday. But I understand there's a bit of an injury crisis with Birmingham at the minute. Is that right? Am I reading the newspaper sensational headlines and making them up?
When isn't there an injury crisis at Blues? We've had one in
Yeah.
about we have like one every season now, maybe even two if we're lucky. But we've got a lot of injury prone players. That's the problem. They're great. They're great quality players who could easily, in my opinion, make a promotion side. Really, you look at players like Ethan Laird, Dion Sanderson, Christian Bielik. Players who have been at the top end of that championship before. Some have been Premier League players as well. So they're with us because they can't stay fit. They're always injured. Like Tyler Roberts, he's only played one game for us this season. Yeah, he's been injured ever since, and his quality is clear to see. He's fantastic. He was excellent against Swansea, and some other players as well, like Sariki Dembele, who I'm an enormous fan of. He's always picking up knocks and things here and there. So it's just how they are really, and that they will make returns. Of course, Christian Bielik's out for a little bit. And Ethan Laird's just come out after being injured since August, I think it was. And he came back in and he was absolutely fantastic again, so it's like, I think it's just the sort of frustrating thing we're going to have to put up with this season. Lee Buchanan as well, still injured. Excellent left back, played fantastically in all of his games this season so far. And he gets injured and then we're back being a bit of a average championship team, really. So I think that's just sort of how we're going to go this season. So, I can't really think of other ways of putting it, but yeah, we're just a bit injury prone, really.
Handy for us, I suppose. We've touched a lot on Job, obviously for obvious reasons. There's a few players that have had good starts to the season for us. Which ones have stood out for you? Like, which players are you fearing most, shall we say, coming up this Saturday?
Job. I can't lie. It is definitely Job. I don't know. It's not really individuals. I feel like whenever I look at teams, particularly with Ipswich last week, there wasn't a lot of individuals I was looking for. I was just looking for the ways that they were going to impact us, really. Because even though we are still building a team, that it's the individuals for us at the moment, I think are probably the impact really and what's going to change the game. But I feel like a proper sound team like yourself, so that they've built that team now. They've got that structure. They've made the playoffs last season and they're back there again in that sort of position again. So it's like, I don't think I'm really worried about individuals. I'm definitely more concerned about how they're going to play. And sort of singling out sort of our own individuals, which I suppose I can get where Rooney's coming from. I wouldn't say that as a manager personally, but I feel like they could potentially pick certain players out of the game, like maybe Manny Longello, maybe at left back if he plays at the weekend, or Cody Drama has been playing at left back as well, who's more predominantly a right back. So those are the sort of the weaknesses I worry. And as a team, Sunderland and a more established team than we are currently, that's the thing I perhaps worry about more there.
In terms of predictions, I'm weirdly not feeling that confident this weekend. I don't think we'll get beat. I don't know why. I just feel like we only need to win. And when you just have that kind of like feeling, but I fancy a draw. I actually think it's a more difficult game than we probably think we've got both our centre halves out with suspension, which is not great, which means there's going to be changes regardless. But I won't take a 1-1, but I think it'll be a 1-1. But I'll hand the judgment over to you as well for your side and your thoughts.
Well, the last time I went to Stadium of Light, it was 1-1. It was in 2017, just before Christmas. We took the lead through Sam Gallagher, and I think it was Lewis Grabban who equalised for you guys.
Oh God, that was back in the day, Jesus.
Yeah, back when we were both as terrible as each other.
We were specifically bad at that point, yes.
Yeah, really bad time for both of our histories, really. We were bottom at the time. It was ridiculous. Yeah, so that was the last time I went there. It was 1-1. So I could see another draw. I think it'd be typical of us to go and win 1-0. That's the sort of team that we are. It's like we played really well the week before and don't win but deserve it. And then we'll probably just about scrape a win this week and probably not deserve it the way we did against Ipswich. So I think, I don't know, it again, it's just how typical Blues can be, really. So if we play really well, we probably won't win. But if we play all right, just sort of pinch a goal, then I think we will win it. Unless we're typical Blues again, lose it in the 98th minute or something like that. So it's, I don't know, I can't really see. But it's a firm and bold prediction. I'll go 1-0. I think we could perhaps nick something.
Sounds very bold. Tommy, thanks as always for joining me, mate. Have an awful Saturday. I mean that truly and honestly, but enjoy the rest of the season after that. Thanks for joining, mate.
Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.